What a beautiful day.
I don't have one.
I'd like to thank everybody, for coming today for this time to remember Joe and to celebrate their life. I have a few comments in the beginning, and then the family's going to speak, and then we're going to move to just a time of fellowship afterwards. So, I just want to talk for a minute about the Joe that I knew. I came into this family 40 plus years ago. It's always interesting to kind of think of people when they're younger, when you didn't know them. It's like thinking about your parents in the other room. You just don't think about that very much, do you? I was in a conversation yesterday in the living room with Hannah and her mother, where she discovered that her mother had actually dated someone before Bob. And that's how we all like to think about our parents. But, for a moment, I will tell you that the Joe that I knew was a man of faithful marriage. He was a man of temperance. Joe kept one bottle of beer in the refrigerator. A 6-pack was in the pantry, and when he drank that bottle, they went and got another one, and they put it in the refrigerator. He was a charitable man. Sometimes to a fault. He was diligent in everything that he did. I know in the end of his life, we know that as working in the yard and doing things that he did every day. But I guarantee you, when he was a young man, everything that he did, he was diligent at. He was a kind man, and he was kind to everyone. He was patient with everyone. And he was a humble man. And for those of you who are Catholic, or thinking about being Catholic, or were a Catholic, I just named the 7 virtues. that the Pope says that if we have those 7 virtues, we're equipped to do good deeds on earth. And I would say that Joe's deeds, good deeds, were innumerable. So from the theology side, he was a Unitarian, but he covered all the bases. The final thing I'm going to tell you about is 2 small stories before I turn this over to the family. And that is, Joe had this interesting mischief side. He enjoyed mischievous jokes. When he first moved to El Lago, we would go down to the basketball court where all the teenagers would be playing. And he would prey on the hopeful teenage basketball stars and challenge them to a game of horse. And they would think this is easy pickings. And then he would beat them. And they would look at him and say, "Who are you?" Like they'd been, sucked into playing with some ex-NBA 80-year-old man. And the most recent, I think, thing that talks about Joe, even in his later state, was how he always had a great sense of humor. One day, not too long ago, we were riding to the birthday party of the Bianchis.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It was his 90th birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're in the car. This is not sexist, by the way. Just get prepared for it. We're in the car with Maureen and Susan. Susan's driving, Maureen's behind me. I'm in the right seat, Joe's in the back left seat. And they discover that Joe has not put his hearing aids in. So these women go on for about 5 minutes about Joe, how he won't listen, he can't hear, he doesn't have his hearing aids in, going back and forth. And I'm sitting there silent, and I finally say, I look over at Joe in the back and I say, Joe, they're mad at you because you didn't put your hearing aids in, and you're not going to be able to hear everybody. And he looked at me and he said, sometimes that's better. He was a wonderful man. They've been a blessing to our lives, and we love them so much. So now I'm going to hand it over to the real family. Alan.
Well, actually, it's me next.
Oh, it's you. I'm sorry.
You need a bulletin. Anyone that wants to join me in prayer. God of life, God of love, God of everything. Today we share the loss of our beloved father, husband, brother, granddaddy, uncle, and friend. All of us gathered here today are connected by the love and light shared by my dad, Joe Painter. God, thank you for all of the years we shared with him. And we lift him up to you today to honor the good we saw and felt from him. God, help us to bear our sorrows and to gain some comfort from all the different ways that love and light show up in our lives. In your name, amen.
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 Now,
Hi. So here we are, can you hear me okay? Here we are, we're marking the passing and celebrating the life and memory of my dad. My dad, my brothers and sisters' dad. He was a brother to 12 brothers and sisters. He had a twin brother. He's a husband of 69 years. He's an uncle, a grandfather. Closer. Uncle and grandfather. He had lots of different relations. He was a neighbor, and he was often a very good friend and a good colleague. So all these different relations, but I think that we all recognize pretty much the same qualities in him. He was very gentle. He was very playful. He had very high standards, and he had an enormous dedication to his projects. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about Dad's projects, because Dad always had a lot of projects. Sometimes my mom would say, Joe, can you do this? And Dad would say, well, put it on the list. And so Mom told me recently, well, this meant forget about it. Right? But I think that Dad meant, it's not a priority, but let's make sure that we don't forget about it. Write it down. So that was another thing Dad would do. He would say, it's not a process until it's been documented. So writing was important to him. Getting things right was important to him, making things better. Dad's approach was through his projects. So in fact, when you mention something you wanted to do, he might say, let's make it into a project. And once it was a project, it was elevated to a status that deserved all your attention. So projects were sacred. So as kids, my brother Eric and I, we told Dad, well, we wanted an airplane. So Dad went into the backyard, and he put together a wooden frame. He threw an old brown tarp over it, put on a steering wheel, added a propeller to the front of it, and soon we had a single-engine, two-seater plane with real bucket seats. They were made from paint buckets. we played a lot in that airplane. And then later, when my sister Janice had a science fair experiment that involved electroshock therapy on fertilized eggs, Dad took on the project of making that in-oval electric shock apparatus. He wasn't quite sure how to do it, but he talked to an electrical engineer on a flight back to Wilmington, Delaware, who drew up a circuit diagram for him. And so Dad took me with him to Radio Shack, and we got the parts, a few resistors, a big capacitor, a double throw switch, and we put the thing together. And Janice was soon performing a morning-evening ritual that involved blowing loud whistles and shocking eggs. And Dad had a lot of car projects too, but some of them with mixed results. So one time Dad decided to replace the power steering on the 1969 Pontiac station wagon with a used power steering. He discovered it was difficult to remove a power steering, but he spent the entire day doing it, and he finally succeeded. Then we took it for a test drive. We found that we did have power assist, but it had a tendency to violently lurch in the direction that you were steering. And it was a little bit dangerous. And so we ended up having to take it into the shop, holding very tightly to the steering wheel, and have the professionals replace it with a brand new one. But Dad was a safety nut. So any workplace was analyzed for hazards, tripping hazards, falling object hazards, electrical hazards, fire hazards. Dad made us keenly aware of how to identify and then how to avoid any such dangers. So Dad always had a fire extinguisher on hand at the house, and even a small one in the car. So one time we decided to rebuild the carburetor on the Datsun 510. So Datsun is before it was Nissan, it was Datsun, right? Okay. The Datsun 510. So we replaced the levels and the filters and the gaskets on the carburetor, and then we put it back in the engine. And then before starting the engine, Dad said, well, get the fire extinguisher ready. So we were ready with the fire extinguisher. We started the engine, and it immediately took fire. and we used that fire extinguisher on the fire. So it was almost predestined, even if Unitarians don't believe in predestination. So the shop had to come to the house and tow in the Datsun and change the carburetor. But most of the car projects, they did come to fruition. So Dad wanted to get us sailing, so he bought a Sears sailboat, a Jetwind, 14-foot day sailor. We had the boat, but we didn't have a trailer, and not really the space for a trailer. So Dad said, let's build a roof rack for the sailboat on top of the 69 Pontiac. So he took some 2x6 planks and he tightened them to the gunnel on the top of the roof with some turnbuckles. He fastened them to the nose of the car with a rope, and we were off. And it was an excellent roof rack, and we sailed regularly for many years. I used that roof rack to transport the launch poles of a teepee, poles that were much longer than the car itself, to different scouting events. So lots of use out of that project. So vacation was a fertile time for projects. We loaded up the whole family of 8 into the station wagon and took long drives to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Wichita, Kansas, or Mocaine, Missouri. Dad always brought along a toolbox. Once we arrived, Dad was on the hunt for projects. One year we dug a trench in order to pour a concrete walkway between the 2 front doors of the neighboring houses occupied by the Tulsa painters. It wasn't until the following year that the concrete was poured. And in the meantime, it became known as the Painter Crater. So, in Wichita, we spent the better part of the day replacing a shower door for my Aunt Martha. We picked up side projects along the way, this time replacing the shower heads as well. And also, Dad was a real water conservationist. He said, oh, we need a cutoff valve before that shower head. So we spent a lot of time looking for a cutoff valve, too. So we were always doing projects. And then on our driving trip to Arizona, bringing my sister Karla to Flagstaff for her summer university there, we were staying every night in a different hotel. So 8 people in the car, so necessarily all the suitcases were on the roof rack, secured by a tarp. Dad wanted to make sure that we could unload and load those suitcases efficiently. So he set us to the task of organizing it and establishing the best loading procedure. He timed the operation, and with the challenge of improving the time every day. By the end of the trip, and after some dozens of loading operations, we managed to improve that time quite a bit. So other projects came up unexpectedly, like when I went up for my second year of university at Rice. I brought along some lumber, some 4x4s and some 2x6s, and some other things in order to build a tall bed frame that would sit above the desk in those tiny dorm rooms. They called it a build-up. So it was pretty common at Rice. I was planning on borrowing a saw and nailing things together sometime in the future. I'd get around to it. So Mom and Dad dropped me off on a Saturday with my stuff, with the lumber, and in my tiny dorm room. And I was starting classes the following Monday. So the next day, unexpectedly, here was Dad at Rice with power tools and material. He was there to make sure that we got that build-up finished. And so he put a couple of hours into it and finished off the build-up that Sunday. It was a few hours of projects and 5 hours on the road for my dad. Of course, Dad had some much bigger projects. He was very active in Toastmasters when I was younger. I remember Dad coming in to hug us goodnight after meetings, and I remarked that, "You smell like cigarettes." And he said, "Yeah, there's some smokers at that meeting." So those were different times, thankfully behind us. He was often president or treasurer of the Victoria Unitarian Fellowship and a very active member. He was county chairman for the Victoria Democratic Party for many years, and he actively manned polling stations, set up phone banks, did neighborhood walks and campaigns, met with candidates and would-be candidates. And Mom says that she lost Dad for 10 years to Victoria Habitat for Humanity, during which time he was on the board of directors, on the building committee, and on the candidate selection committee, as well as successfully promoting Victoria Habitat Restore. He talked very proudly about how the city of Victoria donated 12 lots to Habitat for Humanity on the condition that the building on those lots was completed within 2 years. So that was a big deadline and a very big challenge. 12 houses to build in 24 months. So Dad worked with different church groups in Victoria, and each group picked up a specialty. Door frames, windows, siding, electricity, roofing. Almost all the work was volunteer, and the work had to be carefully coordinated. Dad mentioned that it took 1 year for them to figure out how to coordinate themselves for building that very first house. And once they were coordinated, they easily built a new house every month. So they finished the construction of those 12 houses in the allotted 2 years. And Dad got to know the candidate families being chosen by the selection committee. The families all had to contribute to the construction. My mom did too, that's right, as well as sweat equity. But yours is later, Mom. So Dad worked with a bank in Victoria in order to manage a house loan for the chosen families at 0% interest, which required the bank itself to change its information systems. Dad got everyone involved. They were willing co-conspirators in the crime of intense, well-directed, well-organized do-gooding. His incredible enthusiasm and warm-hearted nature inspired many people. In some ways, that was one of Dad's crowning achievements and one for which he was very proud. So Dad had a lot of family projects. His kids were projects, getting him through school and university and out in the real world. His mother, brothers, and sisters were projects to which he contributed enormously, financially and time-wise, in collaboration with his brothers, John and George. Mom and Dad made trips to see everyone. They were there to check up on their projects. They came to see me in California, several times in Boston, Isabel and our kids in France about a dozen times, and even once in Ireland. Projects were sacred, and family projects even more so. Dad's projects all had an underlying theme: take care of those close to you, help those in need. Dad sometimes worked his projects in the face of adversity, promoting different Democratic candidates for president in a largely Republican area. Dad regularly had his campaign signs stolen from the front yard. When he took on the task of helping an aging church member in managing her failing finances, the church member's son and even the church member herself often opposed Dad's actions. Dad even received some threats. Dad's family expressed concern and consternation from the events. But Dad was resolute. It was a thankless task, but he thought it was the right thing to do. He did this selflessly and to his own personal expense, and sometimes to my mom's expense as well. So these past 5 or 6 years, my dad was slowly fading away. He couldn't quite organize things with spreadsheets in them anymore the way he'd always done. He still had his projects, but they were just more limited to yard work and such, and on his own yard, but also the neighbors' yards and the sidewalks and the streets. He was constantly outside. So my dad's passed, but he isn't gone. I think that Dad's kind-heartedness and good nature are as present now as ever. His projects continue. Family and friends are still inspired by my dad. I know that I am, even though my own projects are much less ambitious than my dad's. So regularly when I'm presented with a dilemma, I ask myself, what would my dad do? Dad had a unique and close relationship with his twin brother, John. When John died, Dad declared, "I will think about you every day." Well, me too, Dad. I will think about you every day. I won't be sad. I'll be happy to know such a good man and proud to have him as my dad. Thanks, Dad. And thanks to you all for being here.
You're going to make me cry right before I have to get mine.
That's why I went first.
That was the mischievous one.
Okay, I've chosen to write a letter to my daddy. Dear Dad, even as I prepare to write this letter for your memorial service, I'm imagining you being excited that I'm about to do some public speaking. I can imagine you encouraging me and perhaps giving me some Toastmasters pointers. I can so clearly see you telling me, "That's great," and doing the signature slap on the leg move. I just totally pictured it as I was doing this. And all in our family knows if he's about to do the signature move and you're sitting nearby, oh, watch out. So, Dad, how to express my deep gratitude for having a good daddy like you feels impossible to put into words. But you also showed me not to shy away from hard work. So here it goes. Dad, you've been there every step of the way in my 62 years. Because of you and Mom, I grew up in a happy family where all 6 kids knew they were worth the effort and cherished. You and Mom worked tirelessly to keep our large household going. But not only did you teach me about hard work, you were a dad that showed us that taking time to have fun was important too. Whether it was you making play items out of big boxes, or playing ping pong with us, or one of my favorite little girl memories of you giving us rides in the wheelbarrow round and round the house. I know. I really don't know where he got his energy. Your fun energy was noticed by all, and it really showed up with the grandkids. It was wonderful watching you do things over and over to make the little ones laugh. One of my favorite memories was when Clay and Andrew, they were about 4 years old, and you and your identical twin, John, were visiting, and the two of you walked into our house. And this was too much for the little guys to take in, and they just ran in big circles around the house, screaming in delight and confusion. And Janice reminded me later that Andrew asked John if he was the evil twin. Dad, we always looked forward to seeing you. Dad, you were also someone that we could count on during times of need. Your entire life, you have dedicated yourself to helping all of your kids and later their spouses that became your kids. You helped us through countless moves times 6. I really don't know how y'all did that, Mom. And growing up, you helped us with our physics homework. Super yuck. And any other need, you saw arise. You've always given it your all in any organization that was lucky enough to have you. Whether it was Toastmasters, the Unitarian Church, Habitat for Humanity, and more. In your last years, dementia took its toll, but your helper's heart was there to the end. Whether it was moving neighbors' lawns, or taking in neighbors' trash cans, and tirelessly keeping the surrounding sidewalks and gutter clear of leaves. No leaf was safe with you around, Dad. You became quite the neighborhood fixture. Everyone misses seeing you, Dad. Dad, I will so miss your multiple daily quick pop-ins to our house on your daily walkabouts. I will dearly miss my sweet old daddy, even at 91 years old, would walking me home 3 doors down if it was dark. Dad, I really worked at soaking in the sweetness of those brief dark walks with you. Even though in reality I was a bit worried about you making it home and tripping on the uneven sidewalks, and so I would watch out the door for a bit as you made your way back home. Dad, you know you can count on us to take care of Mom and to love on her. I cannot thank you enough for showing me what a marriage with two adoring partners looks like. Dad, some of the things that give me solace are not only that you had a 91-year-old long life, you had a truly good one. And I love imagining your wondrous face, seeing the other side, and knowing that in a blink of an eye, we will be together again. Now I made you cry.
You did.
That's what
Okay. They have nicer notes. We have lots of notes. Okay, how do you turn it on?
It's already
It's on.
Oh, that's terrible.
Hold
Okay.
it close to your mouth. Former sound person.
Okay. Okay. When my oldest daughter Sarah was really little, she had briefly a wonderful mylar balloon. It was a butterfly, and she did not want anyone to tie it to her wrist because she was capable of hanging on to it, and she would never let it go. And of course, we know what happened when she walked outside. And I found myself telling this little tiny girl, well, you know what? You're going to remember that balloon forever. You'll know exactly what it looked like and how much you loved it. And if you hadn't lost it, you'd probably forget about it. And I went, I am channeling my father. The little tiny kids don't necessarily do well with that. But he'd taken a course of philosophy when he couldn't fit in the time for a course in logic when he was in college, and it probably had an effect on him forever. He would tell us things like we were a bunch of kids in the car, and he's telling us, well, you know, the people that are just back, that they finally let them come back from Canada, that had left because they didn't want to be drafted into Vietnam, they were just right too early.
Right too.
Yes. Or that Judaism and Christianity, mostly the difference there is that the Jews are waiting for the Messiah and the Christians are waiting for him to come back. He taught kids and grandkids how to ride a bike. And in my case, he had to teach almost every other kid in the whole street how to ride a bike because I was scared of it until I couldn't stand it, that they all got my daddy time. So I learned how to ride a bike also. And we got older, and it was how to change tires, how to change the oil, filters, gapping spark plugs, that's what it is, yes. And waxing it so it looks nice. Cars were also places for conversations that sometimes you get stuck in when you have a lot of kids in the car. He'd taken us out to DuPont pool, and Mom was at home, and we were asking him questions on the way back. He says, Dad, why is there a funny box in the women's restroom and it says napkins on it? And he's endeavoring to explain this. I was the oldest when I was probably maybe 4th grade. And he's explaining things, and we're asking more questions, and explaining things, and he finally got all the way through, facts of life, and I'm going, huh? Really? I don't know if any of the others remember any of this, but it must have been really exciting for him to stare straight ahead and not look at any of us. It was informative. He had advice when you were going to ask Dad for advice. Like when you're asking for colleges, I'm trying to decide on majors, careers. And he said, well, colleges, probably whichever one you pick is going to be the right one. And I looked at him and go, that's a weird thing to say. And he says, and if it's not, you can change. Like, okay, it's not insoluble. Majors, well, if I decided partway through my engineering major that I wanted to be a doctor, I could have used all my chemistry courses for that, so you could do that kind of thing too. And careers, this is, maybe stop wondering what you want to do for the entire rest of your life. Because probably we're going to change jobs more in the future. What do you want to do for 10 years? That's exciting for 10 years. And he was the one that answered the phone when I called from college to say that for the first time in my life I was flunking a course. And he was quiet for just a second, and he said, okay, so what you're first going to learn about this is that you survive. And you do not die, and you just keep on going, and so it's over. Which my roommates' parents were just not happy about when they heard about it, because they were planning to disown their child because she was going to flunk a course. They didn't want me to even answer the phone just in case they were going to be calling. He told us lots of crazy stories, from some of which were for sure had to be lies, right? Or at least sort of exaggerations. Like driving around in the stock truck, that there was no functional radio, so you take the pigs along the back so you can have some music. We didn't believe that. But he also told stories like when he met Mom when they were 12 at a birthday party, a kid's birthday party, and they were horsing around in the backyard, at least for sure the boys were. And my dad threw a bucket of water at somebody else, but it landed on my mother and got her soaking wet in a new dress. And not a popular person with Mr. Joe Painter. And his story is that he turned to his twin brother John and said, that is the girl I'm going to marry. And we're not sure that's true. But Mom did not feel that way at that moment. That moment, you know. He was set up to be a grandfather. You know, he was a baby thief. He could steal almost any baby out of his mother's arms and talk, oh, look over here. Look, there's Christmas tree lights. Or, oh, look and see this. And that didn't work for the rest of us usually. And he loved playing with little kids. Mm-hmm. Little kids loved playing with him. He's the tiger around in the dark room, and if you go and look, he's going to go, rawr, and then you can run screaming and then come back and do it again. And when we all got too big to be little kids, there were little kids in the neighborhood that would knock on our door and ask if Mr. Painter could come out and play. Honest to God. So I learned whatever happens, there's going to be something good or something useful that you can learn from it and take away from it that is not a horrible thing. Like losing my dad. Yeah. For which I have to remember that at least I had him, and that was a really good thing. But I want to leave you with my last piece of car advice from my father when he called me up and told me, so you all need to remember this, when you're gassing up your car, you take the nozzle and you put it in the car first before you hit the button to turn the gas on, because just in case there's a spark somewhere, if you turn it on before that, there might be a fume. Now, I don't know if it has ever happened anywhere, but it might. That's all for me.
You know what? I don't think I'm going to need this microphone. Can y'all hear me in the back? Yeah. All right, that's good. That seems about right. Because, you know, I was definitely one of the quietest ones. Some of my fondest memories of growing up were those long car trips that we took every summer in our Pontiac station wagon. We all packed in that faux wood-sided green land yacht. Everybody, y'all remember this? and with the luggage on the top secured, well, at least most of the time. And we drove from South Texas, and usually we were going out to see families somewhere in the Midwest. We were also able to see some really amazing places like the Empire State Building in New York City, the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the Grand Canyon, White Sands, Carlsbad Caverns, and also some truly special pit stops like Pawnee, Oklahoma. On those endless 14 to 20 hour drives, we all got along beautifully. We never got too loud to make it hard to hear the Watergate hearings on the radio. We all wanted those strawberry shakes rather than chocolate. And we certainly never felt like an ant underneath a magnifying glass in the far back seat when the air conditioner was on. But it was perfect. It actually was. Looking back, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Certainly not feeling car sick for reading a book for too long or having to hold it until the next gas station for 48 miles because you didn't have the tinkle at the PPTP when we stopped 15 minutes ago. Does anybody know what the PPTP is?
No.
In Oklahoma, they had rest stops that were shaped like little teepees, and Susan dubbed it the PPTP, which we thought was fantastic. I would not have wanted to miss out on being adjacent to the rolled down back window while driving by the rendering plant in Dodge City, Kansas, because Dad thought someone had passed gas in the car. And I definitely would not have wanted to miss out on dodging Eric's projectile vomit in the back seat. But yes, it was perfect. It was a good time. And we were so lucky to have that time in our lives and to have Dad in our lives. Even when he played that horrible Barbra Streisand 8-track or sang opera in the car. He loved those trips. And even after a long 28,000-hour drive, and we were just about to be home to Victoria, Texas, Dad would say, "Hey kids, we could go to Laredo!" And of course we would all groan, and he did it on purpose. That was just our dad, and it was one of the many reasons that we loved him. Dad was and is my hero. He taught me how to ride a bike. He taught me how to play basketball. He taught me that hard work, fair play, and integrity were very important. He taught me that civic responsibility, critical thinking, a good education, understanding other people's perspectives, and human decency were absolutely essential for this world. He certainly made this little corner of it all that much better for what he gave to it and all of us. I heard Mom say recently that he was just the best, and I completely agree. I will leave you with this poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who coincidentally, as I understand it, was also a Unitarian like Dad. And I think from my sister Susan's suggestion that this is pretty much the essence of who we thought our dad was. And it's called To Laugh Often and Much. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know that one life has breathed easier because you lived here. And this is to have succeed. And I definitely think my dad did. Thanks.
One more.
Joe was an identical twin. His brother was John. And I have a letter from
Lucy Jones.
from John's family. And I have yet to been able to get through it without breaking down. So bear with me. dear cousins, we are sorry to hear of the loss of your dad. As you know, we lost our dad as well a little over a year ago. As we reflect on our time with your father, we can't help but note how similar our dads were, truly identical twins. Everything from physical appearance to mannerisms, personality, and values. These are undoubtedly differences between them, but as children, there are undoubtedly differences between them, but as children, we didn't see any differences. To us, they were nearly interchangeable. Since to know our dad is to know your dad. We know how lucky you are to have a father who, first and foremost, loved being a dad, who took joy in organizing projects and games with his children, one who truly wanted the best for each of us. And our dads did it all again when the grandkids came along. We both had fathers who were great examples of a life well lived. Our job and our children's job is to try our best to bring the same enthusiasm, joy, and caring to our children as our dads did to us, which is a high bar. Our dads held a special bond throughout their lives and always seemed to know what the other was thinking. Despite their bond, they did have a brotherly competition from the basketball court to the ping pong table. I'm sure our dad would want us to mention that he did beat your dad in their final race to the pearly gates. When your dad arrived there a few weeks back, our dad probably greeted him by saying, "What took you so long?" And then threw him the basketball. So, I made it through. Thank you all for the start to this wonderful day, and I'd like to have us all kind of retire now to a time of fellowship. Maureen's up here. I'm sorry. And there's a video that's going to be playing in this room and the other room with lots of pictures, which I'm sure you haven't seen. And just remember this, dads, that when you get to your funeral, you can't be the only one who takes all the pictures. Okay? So, anyway, thank you all very much.